I know the government's kind of crazy, doing all this weird stuff with reopening things, and I will not get started on that. I just wanted to mention that as much as is possible, please continue to stay home and social distance, regardless of what the governments may or may not say. That's all I'm going to say about it. Just please, please, please stay home, no matter what other people say, until there's some type of vaccine or solution. Um, so that's just my little tidbit on that. So I'm really, really excited about tonight's Wellness Wednesday. We are going to be talking about the father complex, aka mommy and daddy issues. So this one is going to be a little different. Instead of just saying a bunch of facts, I'd like to tell bits of my story in order to kind of get rid of the taboo that we're not supposed to talk about our family's dirty laundry. I think that mindset has been perpetuated, and that it really kind of keeps people bound because when I actually finally did start talking about what was going on with my family, I found out that a lot of my friends were experiencing the same things and felt the same way. And I just kind of wanted to help make it okay to talk about what's going on or what has gone on and how it makes you feel and how it has affected you. So I'm going to talk about my own family. I'm not going to specify whether I'm talking about my mom or my dad, because for the sake of this Wellness Wednesday, it doesn't really matter. What matters is just that it happened. Um, and I kind of want to guide you into who's at my gate. Sorry, friends. Anyway, I kind of want to guide you guys into navigating and analyzing what happened during your childhood, what happened in your household, and how that can then influence your current day-to-day life. So, for example, some of the things that happened while I was younger, and please don't think that it has to only be things from when you were little. A lot of the damage that my parents caused me was when I was in high school. So anytime during your formative years, which is all the way up through teenage years, your family can negatively impact you, even in adulthood. But thankfully, in adulthood, we have more autonomy. You know, like we can choose how much we allow our parents into our lives, hopefully. But without further ado, I'm just going to kind of go into what happened in my family, and how it then affected a lot of my romantic relationships, how it affects my mental health slash mental illness, and how I kind of recognized patterns and then broke those patterns through therapy and through different strategies, and honestly just being honest with myself, because I think that if we are willing to be introspective, we will see that a lot of the things that we may have learned from our family members, we don't necessarily have to repeat. So I want this to be a freeing Wellness Wednesday. And hopefully by the end of it, you will feel liberated to leave the negative patterns from your family in the past and dictate your own future through the grace of God. So when I was younger, around the time when my brothers went to college and I was the only one around home, that's when it kind of started getting more and more rough, where whenever I was home, my parents were just screaming at each other. They were just very angry, and I hated being home. And thankfully, I went to a boarding school at the time, so as much as possible, I was away from home. But whenever I was home, it was very, very painful. It was very, very scary. And I just really did not have control. And if any of you know me now, I have a very, very, very strong desire for control. And I truly believe that it comes from that period of my life where I really didn't have much control over where I went and what I did. And it just seemed like there was so much chaos happening at home. There were so many things that I wanted to control and that I wish I could control, but I couldn't. So um, through therapy and through talking it out, I realized that that is one of the places where my deep desire for control came from. And I'm still dealing with that today. Thankfully, therapy is awesome and super helpful, but I understand not everyone can afford therapy. Um, so, a lot of these things, honestly, you can realize just by talking it out with someone and kind of looking back over your relationships and figuring out, okay, why does this seem to keep happening no matter who I'm in a relationship with? And kind of start taking inventory of the patterns that you've noticed as far as your behavior in your relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but friendships as well. Um, so, yeah, I'm young. My parents are fighting all the time and screaming. It's crazy and it's horrible. And one of my parents kind of started comparing me a lot. Like, oh, this person's kid plays the piano and you don't. This person's kid has a driver's license already and you don't. This person's kid is in this group and you're not. So all the time, I just felt like this parent was specifically kind of comparing me to other people and just kind of zeroing in on what I wasn't instead of celebrating what I was. Because I mean, I was trying, like I was really trying. I was in the choir, I was on high honor roll, I was taking college level classes in high school, and it just seemed like no matter what I did, this parent was only focusing on what I wasn't doing. So how does that affect me now? Now I struggle with perfectionism. I'm incredibly, incredibly hard on myself. And the way that I talk to myself, my self talk is incredibly, incredibly similar to the way that this parent used to talk about me. I'm always feeling like, oh, like there's more that I should be doing, or oh, like I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not doing enough. So I kind of personalized the way that my parent viewed me, and I didn't realize that until years later. So it's not like it was just like, oh, boom, like I got this from my parent. Like I was just going on in life and having incredibly, incredibly high expectations for myself and not giving myself any grace or any leeway because of the way that this parent used to talk to me. And I would compare myself to others all the time, just like this parent taught me to. And no matter what I was doing, no matter what I was successful at, I could only seem to focus on what I wasn't doing or what I wasn't successful at. Um, so perfectionism stemmed from that. Um, and at any point, as you're listening to this is not to blame my parents. This is just to kind of help you guys understand the process of figuring out what happened and how it's affecting you so that you can then take back control, take accountability, take responsibility for where you are now and understanding where it stemmed from so that you can address it and hopefully overcome it so you don't repeat the same mistakes. Um, so I'm not blaming my parents, I'm just explaining where things may have originated and how I'm overcoming or processing through it now. Um, Also, coming from a traditionally Caribbean household, we were not allowed to talk back. That was deemed incredibly disrespectful. So even if our parents were yelling at us, even if our parents were being really nasty, even if our parents were saying things that weren't fair or weren't true, if we said anything and other than a deep apology, then we were wrong and we were being rude. So I was taught from a very young age that you cannot talk back, you cannot defend yourself. Everything is just disrespectful. So because of that, I've become uh, a deep, deep people pleaser, where I really don't like anyone not liking me, like anyone at all, even people who are just coworkers who have no bearing on my life, who don't pay my bills. Um, I really, really just people please, and I try to be whatever people expect me to be in that moment because um, fast forward a few years. So when I mentioned before, my parents used to fight a lot, and then one of my parents used to compare me to a lot of kids. So I had already kind of distanced myself from this parent, and then I found out that one of my parents was unfaithful in the marriage, which just kind of rocked my world. Like I knew our family wasn't perfect. Um, but I thought we were pretty dang close. So it took me a long time just to even accept that was part of our story, and then everything just kind of snowballed from there. So once we found out that it it had happened, that infidelity had happened in my parents' marriage, then I was the confidant now, which I never should have been as a child. That's not my role. But I mean, this is real life. People don't always consider how their actions and words affect other people or damage other people. So that's what happened. For months, I was the only person that my parent who had been cheated on spoke to about it, telling me very painful things about the other one. And then finally, we had like this kind of intervention as a family. It went horribly. And it kind of just became like a war where we, the children, were the territory that was being fought over. And there was no choice but to pick sides. There was no, oh, this is between us kind of thing. We had to choose sides, and we had to choose wisely. And it kind of felt like we didn't really have a choice because one parent, if we didn't respond to calls and text messages, we got really, really nasty voicemails, really, really nasty just messages. And then the other parent, if they found out that we had talked to the other parent, would call names, give me the silent treatment for days at a time, yell at me, and all these different types of things. So from both ends, our parents were very, very guilt trippy. And it was incredibly manipulative. Saying, "Oh, I've done a lot for you. Oh, I just care about you. Oh, I just worry about you. Oh, I'm just trying the best that I can." So there was a lot of the passive aggressive like manipulation going on, and then there was just flat out aggression. Like, you should be over this. This has nothing to do with you, and you need to respect me, and you need to treat me that way, and you're a traitor, and you're this and you're that. So there was that, and there was a long time, like a very long time, when I honestly didn't want much to do with either parent. Both of them had become very nasty, very resentful, very bitter, very angry, um, and it just wasn't really healthy in my family for a while. Um, and what I had to do was distance. One parent I really barely talked to for about 2 years. The other parent I was living with, so that didn't really work. But emotionally, I had distanced myself. And then as soon as I graduated college, I didn't even consider going back to the state of Pennsylvania. Like, it wasn't an option, it wasn't in the cards. I was either going to stay in Michigan where I went to school, or I was going to go somewhere else, anywhere else. But I didn't have the option of going back home because I knew that it was going to be incredibly, incredibly toxic. And that is something I wanted to mention. Please do not allow anyone to make you feel guilty for distancing yourself from family members. Toxic is toxic. And I know that's easier said than done. It took me a while, but the sooner that you can get out, the better. If it's not something you're able to do physically, which would be ideal, you can still distance yourself emotionally and mentally. So, what I would do, in order to not be disrespectful, I would respond. And I'd be like, "Hello, how are you? I'm fine, thank you." Like, I was very, very like just blank, no emotion, no affection, nothing. Very, very like receptionist, like almost like work professional with one of my parents. And then when I moved away, that's the whole reason I moved here to the state of Georgia, all on my own, not near either parent. Um, when I moved away, I pretty much stopped talking to my other parent as well, because I had finally gotten to the point where I had realized that I needed to take responsibility for myself. I didn't want to blame my parents for anything, but I also didn't want to be under their thumb either, because I knew that until they healed, they were going to keep being toxic. And I didn't necessarily blame them because, as far as I knew, they hadn't, neither of them had really gotten professional support as far as mental health. So I could kind of reason that the way that they were acting wasn't about me. It was more about them and what they were going through. But it was still, their behavior at the time was still very selfish and very self-centered and very toxic to me. Um, which is why I just knew that I needed to distance myself. So as much as possible, if you can, distance yourself physically. If not, distance yourself emotionally and mentally, and just kind of give them a very blank um, response if you have to respond at all. Um, as far as the, I mentioned that. So also, both my parents would compare me. So I mentioned one of my parents earlier would compare me to other people's kids. And then my other parents started comparing me to um, my siblings. And they would say things like, oh, you're not like your brothers. You're not like me. You're not like the way that I was with my siblings when I was your age. You're not like us. And that really damaged me because I felt like there was just something intrinsically wrong with me. I felt like I was almost like wrong for trying to do better because at this point I started getting help. Um, because at the university I went to, they thankfully had free counseling because my family was not very supportive as far as mental illness. They're better now, but at first they didn't really understand it, they didn't really know what it was, and I knew I wasn't going to really get help from them. So I went and sought therapy. But after that, I started realizing how toxic our family truly was, all the passive aggression, all the yelling, all the silent treatment, all the comparing, all the manipulation. I hadn't realized how toxic it was until I was outside of it and until I started getting better. And that's why I keep saying it's so important not to let them guilt you into staying. Don't let them say, oh, well, we're family. All you have is family. Blood is thicker than water. Um, because if they truly very valued family, they wouldn't be damaging you. They wouldn't be continually acting in a way that is hurting you and that is toxic to you and that is causing you harm that will last for years to come. So if they try to pull that with you, kind of try to shift the spotlight to them and help them understand that the way they're treating you isn't really showing that they think blood is thicker than water. If your family allows that. If it's just going to be more stressful than anything, don't stress yourself. But yeah, once I started not talking to my parents, that seemed to kind of be the revelation moment where they were just like, oh, this is serious. I can't just treat her any type of way. And I think that happens a lot with family, where people kind of use other people in their family as emotional punching bags because they know they won't leave or they know that, you'll always love them. So they feel like, okay, I'm home, I can unload now because these people have to love me, which really isn't fair. Um, and I think that we have to understand that it's not selfish to take care of yourself. It's necessary, absolutely necessary. If someone was smoking around you and you didn't smoke and you preferred not to be around smoke, then I would hope that you would remove yourself from that person. And if someone is emotionally toxic to you, then you need to do the same thing and still remove yourself from that situation or from that area. So I kind of wanted to talk about how that comparing. Oh no, I'm sorry, friends. Okay, there we go. I wanted to talk about how my parents comparing me to other people, um, whether it was my siblings or other people's children, really, really caused me to have a low self-esteem. And the low self-esteem is coupled with the perfectionism. They go together because usually people struggle with perfectionism because they feel like if they're not perfect, they're trash, and there's no in between, or at least for me. That's why I'm incredibly hard on myself. And also because I kind of wanted to prove something to my parents and to anyone who had doubted me because I had mental illness. So I was really, really hard on myself. But all of this to say that it's really important to look back on your romantic relationships and your friendships, um, and just kind of analyze and see what has occurred multiple times. So, for example, with me, oh, sorry, that's my alarm because I'm currently cooking chicken, but that's all right. So for me, I have been looking back over my relationships, whether it's with friendships or romantic relationships. And for the most part, I realized that I had been looking for people in my life who were like the parent who compared me a lot to other people's children. And I didn't realize that until after. But I realized that I kept looking for people who were emotionally unavailable, people who had very high expectations of me, people who did not value me as I was, and people who wanted something from me. And I really struggled with the idea of someone loving me just for me. I felt like I needed to provide something or give something to make being around me or being with me worthwhile. I still kind of struggle with that. I don't always believe that people just want to be around me to be around me. I believe that it's because I give them something. And that was another toxic thought pattern that was in my family. Whenever I was hurt by someone or something that someone in my family said, there was a very quick, oh, just stop being like that, stop acting like that. It was very aggressive, and I felt like I was not allowed to just kind of feel, or I wasn't ever allowed to be offended by something. Um, and when I was, like the first response was like, we do so much for you, we've done so much for you, um, and just a very guilt-ridden statement. Basically, to me, I interpret it as, if someone does things for you, you owe them something, because that's how I felt whenever I was hurt or angry. um, Instead of an apology, a lot of the time was like, oh, we do so much for you, we do so much for you, you should know that, and you shouldn't act like this. So I felt like my feelings were supposed to take a backseat to the obligation that I must have had, um, to anyone who did things for me. And I didn't realize how much that had permeated my mindset and my worldview and my views on love and affection and relationship, until I started looking back over my relationships and realizing that I still do it. Like, I still try to give, I still try to buy things, I still try to serve, which none of those things are bad. But if you're doing them from a place of feeling inadequate, they are very bad. And that is the place that I was doing it from, because I felt like in order to show love, I had to do things. In order to deserve love, I had to do things. So that is something that caused something from my upbringing and from my family, that caused me to have a lot of difficulty in relationships. So I hope that this has kind of given you an idea, and an example of how you can look back through your life, look back at how you were treated by your family members, by your mom and your dad, and kind of identify some of the toxic traits that have now caused negative thought patterns and habits for you in your relationships, in your friendships. So how do we deal with these things? If we see patterns and habits in ourselves that we may have picked up from our families and from our parents, how do we deal with that? How do we start the process of coming out of that so that we do not repeat the same mistakes? I definitely at first just really needed to understand that I was not destined to repeat the same mistakes my parents did. Because in my head, I was just like, oh my gosh, like, these people raised me. There's no possible way that I'll be able to change my mindset enough to not be in an incredibly unhappy marriage. And my parents are split, like officially split now. Um, and I was just so afraid. Like, I grew up just like any other little girl, desiring marriage and a family, Like I wanted the white picket fence with the golden retriever and 2.5 children, just like everybody else. But I I hadn't realized how much my view on marriage had changed. Like I still desire relationship and marriage, um, but somewhere in the back of my head, I don't believe in it anymore. I don't believe that people who stay together are happy. To me, I feel like people stay together because it's convenient, because it's more work to go through all the ugliness of an official divorce. Um, and I don't believe that on a conscious level. Um, but I realize that somewhere in my subconscious, I am afraid of that. I'm afraid that 5 years into my marriage or 10 years into my marriage, we'll kind of just settle into staying together because of the children or because, it gets easier, but not out of sheer and true love for each other. Um, so that's just to say that I'm still grappling with everything that has happened to me um, as a result of um, toxic treatment from both parents. Um, but I am hopeful that I will be able to work through these things. And this is a part of that, just being transparent with your friends and your family about how toxic these things are, how they affected you. That's the first part. And kind of talking it out to kind of figure out for yourself what patterns do you notice in your family that you seem to be repeating in your relationships. Um, be assertive. Be assertive. It's really, really important that you're honest with your family. Before I stopped talking to my family, I didn't just stop talking to them. I tried as much as possible to be assertive and saying, like when you did this thing, it made me feel blah, blah, blah. I felt blank when blah, blah, blah. I tried as much as possible to communicate what was toxic and what was unhealthy, but at the time, nobody was trying to hear all that. So that's why I had to eventually move to the more extreme level of completely distancing myself, both physically and socially. But as much as possible, please be assertive. Try to communicate using I statements without attacking the person. Because let's be real, our grandparents weren't perfect either. So, not that that's an excuse, but it is a reason um, that may be why our parents have acted the way that they have with us and sometimes been very careless in how they've interacted with us. So, like I said before, it's not about blaming, it's about not personalizing. So, remembering that however toxic your family may have been, um, it is not a direct result of you. It is likely something that happened as a result of choices and generational issues that have been passed down and perpetuated throughout the family line. So please, please just do not blame yourself. You single handedly did not ruin your family. You probably were doing the best you could at the time and trying to survive. And that's why you may see some of the same patterns in yourself that your parents exhibited, because sometimes we have to learn how to survive for a time. But now, as adults, we have the opportunity to do better because we know better. Um, Again, I always, always, always recommend therapy. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm just trying to help people by sharing what I have learned through being in therapy for years with different people. Um, but I highly, highly, highly recommend therapy. And if you're concerned about cost or social distancing, BetterHelp is an awesome resource where it's cost effective and you are able to talk over like Skype-ish stuff, but it's confidential. um, so be assertive, try therapy, and if you um, really, really want to kind of take this on yourself instead, um, just look back over your relationships and try as much as possible not to blame the other people. Um, if you were really hurt by someone, if they like cheated on you and did things that were overtly wrong, obviously, yes. I'm not saying that you take all the blame, but I'm saying rather than focusing on what the other person did, Focus on what you did, even if you were treated really badly. Think about why you stayed, or how you got to that point where you were allowing someone to treat you that badly. Think about the factors that led you there. What was going through your head? What thought patterns have you noticed? And I specifically say patterns have you noticed, and habits that have permeated multiple relationships. Look for the common denominators in your relationships. What are some of the things that you did or said or thought consistently that kind of led to the end result, or kind of influenced how things went? Because and this part isn't fun. Like, it doesn't feel good to look back and see the negative things that you've done or said, but it's necessary. Self-care is not always easy. And if you get nothing else from that, I think from this talk, I think that that is probably one of the most important things, is just to look back and be honest with yourself, and do the hard work of that. Because on the other side is liberation, because you cannot fix a problem you do not realize exists. So it's important to see the patterns and habits that you have in your past relationships, so that you do not continue repeating them in the future. You can address them now, and grow and challenge yourself, so that you kind of exhibit those habits less and less. Um, Distance. So, like I said, as much as possible, just try to distance yourself in whatever way you can. And now, winding down, I just want to throw some verses your way real quick to kind of help you and give you the biblical perspective of parenting, and kind of how parents are supposed to treat children. And if your parents haven't been so great, um, how you can lean on God instead of them in order to help you grow and prepare you for the relationship that you want. Please, 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 please message me if this has meant anything to you, if it has been beneficial to you, because I really just want to help people. I am grateful that I've been blessed with the opportunity to get help, to go to the hospital, to go to partial hospitalization programs, to go to therapy, and I have no problem, obviously, being transparent and telling my story, and telling what I struggle with, telling the dirt of what I've been in, but um, I want to make sure that the content that I'm sharing is meaningful and that it's helping someone. So please just let me know if you were encouraged by this, if this was helpful for you, and also any content that you would like me to cover in the future. We've already talked about anxiety and depression, but I can definitely talk about those in greater detail. And also other aspects like low self-esteem, cognitive distortions, and things like that. So please, please let me know in the comments and through Messenger, if this has been helpful to you, and some things that you would like to see in the future. So now that we're winding down, I'm just going to give you some verses really quickly, to help encourage you as you embark on this journey of growth and introspection. Um, oh, also, really quickly, I did want to mention, if you have been treated negatively and toxically by family members, please, please, please do not wait for an apology. Please do not hinge your healing and your progression on an apology, because you may never get it. And you do not want to give someone who's toxic that amount of control over you. So it's really important that you yourself choose forgiveness. And forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things. So it does not mean that you let that person back into your life fully and just give them all this access to hurt you again. Forgiveness means that you no longer harbor resentment and bitterness towards someone. So forgiveness gives you the control. Be like, okay, I'm gonna take the time and do the necessary work to forgive this person and to let this go, so that I can then move on from that point and better myself. Because otherwise, if you use victimization and just see yourself as a victim, you have no control and you are still waiting for someone to come and save you. So make sure that as much as is within your power, you try to forgive and let it go. And make sure that you are not allowing things from your past to dictate your future. Um, so I just wanted to add a little tidbit. So the verse is Ephesians 6, verses 4. Oh, and please share this, guys, because I think that this video specifically, it definitely applies to a lot of people. Nobody has perfect parents, and I think that this could really help people. So please share this with your friends and on your pages so that other people can hear this message and hopefully be liberated, or at least start the process of liberating. So Ephesians 6:4, it says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. Do not exasperate them to the point of resentment with demands that are trivial and unreasonable or humiliating or abusive, nor by showing favoritism or indifference to any of them, but bring them up tenderly with loving kindness in the instruction of the Lord." So the Bible specifically told parents not to be trash. So that's great. But if your parents were still emotionally, mentally, or physically abusive or toxic and hurtful, don't lose hope, because there is Psalm 27, verse 10. In Psalm 27, verse 10, it says, "Although my father and mother have abandoned me, yet the Lord will take me up and adopt me as his child." So even if your parents were less than perfect, it's really important to remember that we do have one perfect parent. Oh, a friend mentioned, can I talk about inferiority complex? That is a good question. I will do that next week. Okay, so next Wellness Wednesday at 6, we will talk about inferiority complex. We can talk about low self-esteem. Next Wednesday at 6. Thank you so much for leaving a comment and letting me know what you guys would like to hear about, because that is really important. And I am more than happy to do that. All right, and then we just got 2 more verses and then we're done. We're wrapping up here. Isaiah 49, verse 15. Isaiah 49, verse 15 says, "The Lord answered, can a woman forget her nursing child and have no compassion on the son of her womb? Even these may forget, but I will not forget you." And that's Jesus talking, or God talking, one and the same. So this verse to me is really encouraging, because it's saying, it's like a promise from God. Like, even if your parents let you down, God never will. And the last one is Mark 11:25. Now, this one isn't directly about parents, but it is about forgiveness. And remember how I mentioned before, if we're going to heal, we have to forgive. And forgiving means letting go of the bitterness and the resentment. It does not mean welcoming that person into your life again. For this reason, I'm telling you, whatever things, 25. Sorry. Whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, meaning drop the issue and let it go, so that your Father who is in heaven will also forgive you your transgressions and wrongdoings against him and others. And that is really important too, just remembering that we're not perfect either, because I found that it really helped me to understand that I have hurt other people without meaning to. Not that that excuses me, and as much as possible, I try to apologize when I do something wrong. But kind of looking at your families and your parents in light of the fact that you're not perfect either can help give you enough compassion to forgive and not let it hold you back, not let it control you. And then messages with those passages should be shared more often. I've seen children completely savaged by parents in public and church. How do you think one should approach parents to... Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so someone asked, um, how should we approach parents to seeking counseling on this issue? So I actually did try to encourage one of my parents to get counseling. Um, and the way that I did that was mentioning how helpful it has been for me to get counseling, and how much I didn't realize a lot of things that I was doing or the way I was thinking was hurting me and not serving me at all. So I tried to come at it from a perspective of talking about myself, because I found that people are more receptive to things when you're not coming at it from an accusatory standpoint, and you present it more as like, oh, um, by the way, this is something that has been helpful for me. Maybe it'll be helpful for you. Um, because I know, at least with my family, if I was to say like, oh, you did this, and because you did this, I think you should do this, it just wouldn't be received. Not that that's not true, but it just wouldn't be received, which means it wouldn't be very helpful for either of us. So the way that I present it is usually to talk about myself and talk about how cathartic and healing therapy has been for me, to then hopefully encourage them to seek the same. If you are not in therapy, then obviously you cannot talk about how therapy has helped you. But I would say it in a way of like, depending on how close I am to the person, I would present it as, oh, like, hey, I noticed that this was happening, and as your friend or as someone who really cares about you, I think that this may be hurtful to the child, or like I just noticed how they reacted, like they seemed to be like really hurting because of what happened. And I understand that we can get frustrated, especially if you are a parent. Then I feel like that is definitely a conversation where the other person may be more receptive, because you could say, oh, like, I fully get it. Like, I get frustrated sometimes too. But I believe that this is like a healthier way of going through it, or this is a more beneficial way of going through it. Um, so I just found that when people are not ready to hear something, um, it doesn't really matter how you say it. So for me, I think it's just important that you say it. And just like with anything uncomfortable, I usually try to just stress that I'm only saying it because I care about the person, that I'm not saying it because I think they're a bad person, and that I'm only saying it for the betterment of them and their life. So I would just stress that. And like I said, if you are a parent, then I think that they would definitely be more receptive to it, because you can come from a place of like, I get it. I get it. So that's what I would try. But I would also just pray about it. Whenever I have to have a difficult conversation with someone, I pray about it and I ask the Holy Spirit for the words. But usually, if you just really stress that you're only saying things because you care about someone, usually they'll be more receptive to it. But don't take it personally if they're not, because a lot of people don't want to be introspective, don't want to be honest about where they are and what they're doing and how it's affecting others, because then that forces them into a position of accountability and responsibility, where they would have to then make a change. And unfortunately, some people are against that, and they like to think that they are above needing help, or needing therapy, or needing advice. So unfortunately, that does happen. But as long as you have communicated what you thought would be a better way of handling things or doing things, then you just pray about it and hope that the the Lord will work on their hearts. Because for me, it took years. It took years for me to forgive my parents, and then to reconcile with them. And it took a lot of distance. It took a lot of pain. It took a lot of um, conversations, and it took a lot of not having any conversations for long periods of time. So there's not really a one size fits all as far as how to address these things. Um, but that's how I would handle that. So without further ado, I am going to let you guys go. I'm so glad that you guys joined me for Wellness Wednesday. I'm really glad that people are starting to collaborate and talk. That is really, really awesome. And next Wellness Wednesday, we will definitely talk about the inferiority complex, and we'll talk about low self-esteem, because that is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart, because I think a lot of people struggle with that, and struggle with the effects of that without exactly knowing that that is in fact what they're struggling from. So I will pray us out, and I hope that I will see you guys next week at 6 on the dot, for our next Wellness Wednesday. Well, let's pray. Dear God, I want to thank you so much, for your love and for the fact that you are our perfect parent who loves us unconditionally, who would never treat us wrongly, no matter how much we have hurt you and let you down. And I pray that you would fill us with your love and allow us to forgive those who have hurt us, and that you would give us discernment as to how to navigate the relationships with our family members who may be toxic, and that you would also help them, to open their eyes to how their actions and words are affecting other people, and that you would bring healing to them and healing to us, and hopefully to our relationships with them, so that we can reconcile. Um, but even if we do not reconcile, I pray that you would help us to forgive, and help us to be honest with ourselves and to figure out which patterns we may be harboring from our families, that are toxic, and help us to liberate ourselves from those things. Show us the areas where we can grow, um, and show us how to have peace and to let go of um, resentment and bitterness and pain, so that we can be liberated in our futures. I thank you so much for your love and for dying for us on the cross. In your name I pray. Amen. All right, guys. I love you guys so, so much. I will see you next time.